Welcome, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Chandraleka Singh. So Chandraleka started her academic journey as an undergraduate in IIT Kharagpur in India. She got her PhD in theoretical condensed matter physics from UC Santa Barbara, and then after which she did a postdoc at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign before moving to Pittsburgh as a faculty member. Apart from her research in theoretical condensed matter physics, she has been conducting research in physics education for over 2 decades. She's led a team, a US team, to the International Conference of Women in Physics. She is a fellow of the American Physical Society, American Association for Advancement of Science, and the American Association of Physics Teachers. She has just recently stepped down, I believe, as the president of the American Association of Physics Teachers. Currently, she's at Pittsburgh. She's a founding director of the Discipline-Based Science Education Research Center, and along with being a professor in physics and astronomy. So with that, Chandraleka, please take it away.
Thank you so much for having me, Mustafa. I'm delighted to be here. And I wanted to start out by showing you this picture that is the famous Solvay conference from 1927. And one of the things that is striking about this picture, I mean, like, it's not just that these are all the, people who basically made the first quantum revolution happen, but that there is hardly any diversity in this group. Like, what you see is that there's only one woman here, and everybody in this picture is white. And the question is, like, and if you look at what the physics conference, what the physics conferences look like right now, this is from a more recent conference. You don't see that there is that much difference from that time, right? And it's kind of looks very similar. So if you think about our students and you say, what do the classrooms look like for the students sitting in the 3rd row or 4th row and 5th row? And if students don't see anybody like them in the classroom, is it possible that they will become anxious? And what will they think about their potential in that course and in physics in general? For example, can their gender or race make them feel worried about whether they belong there and whether they have what it takes to excel? And more importantly, what can you as an instructor do to empower your students to make sure that they excel in physics and they embrace their struggles and use them as learning opportunity in a low anxiety environment? So actually, I want to stop here and ask at least a couple of people to unmute themselves and tell me, like, what do you do as an instructor to empower your students and make sure that all of your students feel like they belong in your classes, as opposed to only those people who look like people in those pictures, or who are the traditional people that physics has had? Anybody wanted to share their thoughts on what they do?
Guess since I'm unmuted, I'll go ahead. So I think we discussed this a bit already in the meetings, but one of the things at least I try to do, which I also learned from our chair as well, is to share some of the struggles that I had as a student, and I still have some version of imposter syndrome that we all tend to have. I tend to share that at the beginning of my class, and examples of how, at least when going from undergrad to grad school, I had a huge sort of struggle of confidence in my first semester, and what that did and how I went through that. So that's something I hope is helpful.
Awesome. That is perfect. That is really good. That is something that you should do. That's part of the thing that I'm going to talk about. So that's very good that you do that. Anybody else wants to share what they do to make sure that all of the students feel like they belong in your classes and they embrace their struggle and use them as learning opportunity, and make sure that the classroom is a low anxiety environment for them?
I have my rejection letter to Rice as an undergrad up on my wall. So
That is a really good thing. I really like all of these examples. Thank you so much. Those are all great things. So now I want to give you a couple of examples of the kinds of things that you shouldn't be doing, like that people often do. So this example says, Professor Smith is concerned about the high failure rate in his introductory physics course. And to encourage students to work harder, he starts the first class by telling students how difficult the course is, and that usually 25% of the students fail. They must be careful, particularly if they think that their background preparation is weak. So can somebody say what is wrong with this particular, what aspect of it is problematic and why?
You're conveying to students that you fully expect 25% of them to fail. I'm not sure that's a great way to start.
Absolutely. Thank you, Doug. So I think that what it's conveying is that you have fixed mindset about the potential of the students in your class, right? I mean, by fixed mindset, I mean, you think that 25% of the students are definitely going to fail. You have no control over those students. You can do nothing to support them. You can do nothing to make sure that they excel. And students who are actually already from marginalized backgrounds, the ones who don't have role models in physics, considering physics has the greatest amount of stereotypes about who belongs here and who can excel in it, those people will think they must be in 25%. Also, students who are first generation college students, students who came from like low income schools areas, they probably had like schools with failing infrastructures, teachers who are not very well prepared, they didn't have AP courses in physics and math. They would think, okay, you have already told them they'll fail. If that's the case, it really is demotivating. Why should they even be trying to do anything if they don't think that, if you don't think that they will succeed, right? So they basically kind of give up. And that is not a very good.
So I have a short question for you on that, because this is very close to reality, many classes that we have been observing. And however, universities have been making effort to get a more diverse group of students coming in, but we have very weak programs on helping the students with the situations you pet transitioning to get the background they need. So what do you do about it? In a sense that I don't think we are doing enough. I was master for many years in a college here, and I figured out that was one of the main problems. I work individually with some students trying to help that. But the question is, you bring them in, but somehow there's not a path of transition into the classes sometime.
Well, okay, thank you, Jose. So it turns out that even when students are coming to your classes with diverse backgrounds, notice that they all have the prerequisites to be in that course, right? And we should be able to support all students. There are several ways to do things. One thing that I do want to say is that technology is a huge help now. Now, digital technology, for example, if you think that a lot of class time should be spent on students engaging in learning while you provide them with feedback and support, then you can actually put your lectures offline. This is what often people call flipped class or hybrid class or something like that. The point is that you can put your lectures online. The great thing is that way students can actually stop, rewind, think about it. But notice that you should never actually put your lectures online and only do evidence-based active engagement in class if you don't reward them for the things that students did outside. Because one of the things is that assessment drives learning. So you should do some formative assessment. And by formative assessment, I mean, give them some low stakes point for everything that is happening. It shouldn't be just 2 midterm and a final exam that counts for everything, right? You should actually reward students for watching those videos by actually asking some questions outside of class that students have to answer. And notice that way, if I was actually not able to catch up on everything during class, I have the ability to rewind, ability to stop and think about it, ability to even check in the book those sections, and then think about those questions that you asked me to answer outside of class, so that I'm prepared to actually do the work that needs to be done in class. And in the class, you can have a combination of like active engagement that is evidence-based, where you can put students in small groups. And my own research shows that students actually, when they're put to work with each other, they can co-construct knowledge. By co-construction, I mean, 1 + 1 is greater than 2. If I couldn't answer a physics question and somebody else couldn't answer, together we can figure it out without even any help from the instructor. So it's really a good idea to have students actually engage in collaborative group problem solving or collaborative clicker questions, whatever, like conceptual or quantitative, both kinds of things. But now this kind of collaboration needs to happen in an equitable and inclusive learning environment. By that, I mean, if I am a woman and I am with people who don't look like me and they are just dominating the scene, and I am actually not feeling like I can actually say something, because maybe if I say something, they are going to judge me. If I don't feel safe, I'm not going to really learn very much from that group work, because I'm going to just keep quiet and I'm not going to participate. Because when you don't participate fully, the benefits of being put in the group is not going to be recognized. So I think that's why it's also important that when you actually create this kind of a group learning environment, you have students recognize that struggling is a good thing. Not knowing something is perfectly fine, because adversity is normal. And if you're struggling, that is good, because that is the stepping stone to learning something new. So you need to embrace your struggle. You need to feel proud of not knowing things, because and talk to people and use good resources, be deliberate in your problem solving, do challenging problems. And when you work hard, work smart, and take advantage of all the resources, you will get to the next step and the next step and next step. We also need to make sure that we actually give to students all of the tools in a way that builds on their initial knowledge. So in other words, there needs to be impedance matching. If suppose students' initial knowledge is like this, and we are targeting instruction this way, learning is not going to be meaningful. So hopefully when stuff is put outside of class, that is incentivized so that students actually will do those things before they come to class, you will make sure that their initial knowledge and whatever thing you're doing is building slowly on it, so that finally they'll still get to where you want them to be at the end of the course. But different students will take different amounts of time. So some students can watch those videos at twice the speed and they'll be fine, whereas other students could may need to think more, because they came from schools that had failing infrastructure, and they need more time to think through. But they will all do it if you reward them with some low stakes assessment to do those out of class activities before you do in class things. And even in the in class activities, I'm saying that those activities can also be interspersed with some short lectures, which kind of recapitulate, that kind of sum up everything that you wanted them to learn. That's what people call a time for telling. If students have struggled with things in small groups on various problems, and then you summarize it, then it makes much more sense to students. So I think all of those strategies could be good strategies for you to use. And now with the digital technology, all the outside and inside class could be totally well integrated. In fact, one good thing also is, when you look at the kinds of things that students are doing outside of class, when they watch your video and answer the question, you can also ask them, what was the most challenging thing? What was the thing, can you summarize this thing? And answer to those kinds of questions can be used to decide what you might actually do in class. And notice that, group problem solving actually helps everybody, even the person who might know the most in the group, because when you articulate your thought processes and make it understandable to other people, it gives clarity to your own ideas. So everybody can benefit from this kind of thing. So that's one thing. So let's move on to another example here. So this one is Professor Jones wants all her students in a class to succeed, and she hopes to increase diversity. So she schedules a weekly help session for her students who might be having difficulty, and she emphasizes that all the women and racial ethnic minority students should attend, stating that her past experiences suggest that they are more likely to need this type of help. So notice that the thing that is problematic about this one is not that the person is arranging extra help session, but if you're doing extra help session in the context of your class, you should not announce in your class that women and racial ethnic minority students should definitely attend because of this thing, because you are already putting them down and saying that those people, this kind of a thing can increase what is called stereotype threats. which is threat associated with being from a group that is already marginalized in a particular community. And when you have awareness that, oh, you belong to this thing and you're not going to do well, you go into a negative feedback loop. And people actually start having anxiety about things. Their cognitive resources are robbed because you have only 5 to 9 chunks in your brain. And if some of those chunks are being taken up by the anxiety of the situation, you're not going to actually use all of your cognitive resources for learning. So this is not a good way to frame this whole thing. If you wanted some students to come personally, you can tell them in your office hours, individually, one-on-one, encourage them. But announcing like this in class is a really bad thing. But having extra session is good. Okay, here is another example. A student asked Professor Rowe how to solve a physics problem, and the professor says, this problem is trivial. By the way, I have done more than 100 interviews, probably more like 200 individual interviews, each of which have been 1 hour long in my own physics education research. This is in addition to all the things that my students have, my PhD students have done, but this thing comes up often. This problem is trivial. This problem is obvious. This is easy. Now, what you have to recognize is that saying that a problem is trivial or easy or obvious for a student who has really worked hard already on it also gives them, stereotype, increases their stereotype threat, because they start thinking, and this is especially true for people who are underrepresented in a discipline, because those people don't have role models. These could be women, racial ethnic minority students, first generation college students, low income students. Those people might start saying, okay, the professor is, saying this problem is trivial when I have struggled with it. This means that I'm not cut out to be here. This means that I don't have what it takes to excel in physics. So now you have to also realize that what is important is not what your intentions are, but what impact you are having on the students. So I already mentioned stereotype threat, which is the fear of confirming a negative stereotype about oneself, right? And so this awareness of the fact that, people like you are not necessarily, there in physics can be very taxing. And people can say, okay, I'm struggling because I belong to this group and people like me are not supposed to be good. What's the point of even trying? So people just give up and they go into this kind of a negative feedback loop. Now, as I said, in ambiguous situation, like saying this problem is trivial, maybe you didn't mean it to be bad, but ambiguity actually puts people in a situation where they start relying on stereotypes, and that diminishes their performance, makes them become anxious, lowers their sense of belonging. And so this kind of a cycle actually makes people go into a negative feedback loop. Now, I want to propose that the model that we should really be thinking about as people who actually teach physics or mentor students in physics is this model that has been used for a long time in, say, sports or, chess or something like that. If you want students to be good in tennis or chess, you would not just actually focus on offense. By offense, I mean the kinds of things that we usually focus on, helping them become effective problem solvers, helping them transfer their learning from one situation to the other, helping them develop a robust conceptual knowledge structure of physics. Those things, of course, we should do. But we should also make sure that all students in our classes have a high sense of belonging. They have an identity as a person who can excel in physics. They have growth mindset as opposed to fixed mindset. Growth mindset means mindset about the fact that intelligence is something that can grow by working hard and working smart, because our brain is a muscle and it can grow. And the harder work we do and the smarter work we do and the more deliberate approaches we use, we take advantage of our struggles and build on our current knowledge, the smarter we will get. As opposed to fixed mindset, which says, no, some people are innately good in physics and some people are not. We want to develop growth mindset as opposed to fixed mindset, because otherwise we are going to be hurting people who have traditionally been marginalized and underrepresented in physics. Also, we need to develop high self-efficacy in physics. And I'm going to show you data from my own research that shows that women in physics, even if they get A grade, they have the same self-efficacy as men with C. And notice that it is not just grade that matters, but also your self-efficacy. You might actually question whether you are in the right field if you don't have high self-efficacy. And so people can drop out at any point, even before finishing their undergraduate degree or graduate degree, or after, if they actually don't have high self-efficacy. And if we as an instructor recognize and mentor, working with students in our labs, if we recognize that we need to inculcate a learning environment which is equitable and inclusive, where all students have high sense of belonging, identity as a person who can excel, growth mindset, and self-efficacy, students will also become more interested in physics, and they will also have higher achievement goals. So making sure that we think of our job as strengthening both students' defense and offense is really important for making sure that all students are feeling safe, and all people are not feeling, none of the students are feeling judged when they're working collaboratively with other students, or when they're asking a question to a professor, or talking to their peers. So it is particularly beneficial if we think about this kind of a framework to help our students, for the students who have traditionally been underrepresented. But notice that anything that you do that is good for underrepresented students, typically it's good for all students, actually. And please.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask a question, but not interrupt you mid-sentence.
No, absolutely. Actually, I would prefer if people ask questions as we go along. Please go ahead, Andrew.
So Chandra, could you define the term self-efficacy? I admit that I first encountered only maybe 4 or 5 years ago when I was in faculty. And my naive interpretation of it, without looking up in Wikipedia, is essentially the resistance to the hardness of the exercise, right? Or how commonly people would put it was that the person applies themselves and to what extent. And so there's definitely research that shows correlation with the high self-efficacy and success. So are you saying that we need to cultivate the self-efficacy, regardless of whether the person coming into class has that efficacy to be low or high to start with?
So self-efficacy is the belief that a student has about their ability to succeed in a particular task or a particular problem. Do you think that I can do well in solving physics problems? Do you think that I have the ability to help other people with physics problem solving? Those kinds of things, if you answer highly on those things, then you have high self-efficacy. If you answer that, no, I don't think I'll do well, then you have low self-efficacy. So this word was actually coined by this person, Albert Bandura. This was in the 70s. And so this is a concept that really is, so in a way it's related to what people call competency belief, or you can even think of it as close to confidence that students have about their own belief, in their own ability to do physics. Mm-hmm. Okay, and those kinds of things, what your beliefs are, when you say that it's correlated with how people do, it is. But the point is, what is our role as an instructor, right, or as a mentor to students in as an undergraduate researcher or graduate researcher working with you on research? What is our role in making sure that students have high sense of belonging? Because notice that if they had higher sense of belonging, that would actually help them do even better in things, right? And that would not make them quit a particular discipline, because one of the things that my own research is also showing is that women are quitting with significantly higher grade in physics and engineering and other related disciplines than men are. So how is it that women leave with 3.5 GPA from these disciplines, whereas men are leaving with 2.8 or something average? So you can see that these kinds of differences are not just about your grade, but something else. You don't feel like, you have what it takes, or you don't feel like you belong in that discipline. Somehow, there is this uneasy sense of not fitting in. And so the point is that, as instructors, we can do a lot. I'll give you an example. So Eileen Pollock was actually the first woman to get her undergraduate degree from Yale University in the 70s. Okay, so she was the only woman in the room, and she wrote her memoir in 2016. Now, it turns out that she did well in her courses, and she actually graduated with good grades as an undergraduate. at Yale, they all had to write an undergraduate thesis. She says that the person, she actually worked with somebody on theory, okay? And the point is that she said that when she solved her problem that her professor had given, her undergraduate advisor had given, she ran to his office, and because she was now sure, she was actually literally ecstatic, triumphant. And she felt that when she'll go and show him that she had solved the problem, he would say, Eileen, you should go to grad school. This is so awesome that you've solved this problem, right? So she knocks on his door, shows him the thing, and he's like, okay. And he went back to his work, right? So he said nothing. And she went from being triumphant to feeling like she was at the bottom of the ocean, because she said, if I really, and she's like, I don't know what to make of it, but I thought that I had done such a great job by solving this undergraduate thesis problem. And this person didn't even acknowledge it, like, he's like, okay, he must have given me a trivial problem, like something that basically doesn't mean that you're good at physics. So, and she was good at writing. So she's like, okay, I'm going to actually do my graduate work in English. So she switched from physics to English, and now she's a professor at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Now, what you have to recognize is that 30 years later, she wanted to write her memoir because physics was her first love, and she still misses not being a physicist. So she went back, and it turns out the same person is now the undergraduate, director over there. And so this time at breakfast, 30 years later, she was so much more, mature. She said, what did you think about my thesis? And he said, oh, Eileen, not that many people do it in theoretical thing. I must say, you did an exceptional job. And she said, really? Why didn't you tell me then? Do you ever tell anybody that they're doing a good job? Do you ever actually encourage them to go to grad school? And he's like, no, I really don't do it because, grad school is so hard. I'm just afraid that people will get the wrong impression if I say that they're doing well. Now, the point is that people already have this, thought in their heart about whether they belong, whether they have what it takes to excel, whether they are doing well. And if you don't recognize them, if you don't affirm them that they are making good progress, the people who are actually who will be the first ones to leave the discipline are the ones who are underrepresented, who don't see other people like them, who don't have role models, who don't know what the path is like and whether they are in the right field or not. So you can see that Eileen Pollock is one person who wrote a memoir, so we know what she went through, but there are lots and lots of Eileen Pollocks and other underrepresented people out there whose stories we don't know, but they are dropping out because, and by the way, I also wanted to say that if you look at the undergraduate physics major data from the United States, what you see is that 1/3 of the people who actually, 1/3 of the students who declare physics major, they will quit. They'll decide, no, I don't want to major in physics, right? Somewhere along the line. So we are not doing a good job with anybody. But if somebody is a racial and ethnic minority student, for them, the percentage is 2/3. So the thing is, twice as many underrepresented students are quitting physics after declaring a major because we are somehow not supporting them the way that we should be. We are actually making them feel like they don't belong and they don't have what it takes to excel. Sorry, I'm trying to get my lights to come here because somehow my light turned off in this office, and this is what happens when nobody is moving around here. So I think that I hope that answers your question about what it means to be. So here actually I define self-efficacy. It's belief in one's capability to succeed in a particular task, course, or subject. Trying to get this light to turn on. Let me just, okay, here it is. Okay, thank you. So I think that, and it can impact students' persistence and engagement, and it can affect, students' performance also because of the anxiety, and also you can procrastinate on things that you don't think you do well on. So all of those things create this really bad situation. And so I want to show you some data from our own introductory physics classes. And what you see here is this is from Physics 1 and this is from Physics 2. These are large physics courses for physics majors, engineering majors, and math majors. And what you see here is grade on the horizontal axis and self-efficacy on the vertical axis. And what you see is that initially in physics 1, men with B had the same self-efficacy as women with A. And by the end of physics 2, women's self-efficacy had dropped so much that men with C had pretty much the same self-efficacy as women with A. So it is actually the gap between the self-efficacy of men and women is only deteriorating. It's getting worse as opposed to getting better. And here are some of the quotations from women in these classes. And you can see that, you know, like people are saying, I have pretty low self-confidence when I see how other people are so smart, other people understand more than I do what's happening in the physics courses. Now, the thing is, people could be showing off, but all of those things are actually working and other people are feeling like they don't belong. The question is, what is the role that we as instructors have in these situations? What can we do to create an environment in which all students feel like they have a high sense of belonging? So before I talk about our own intervention, I'm going to tell you about something, a similar thing that has been done in the past in high school math classes. And this has been done by like Carol Dweck from Stanford University. I think that you might be familiar with her name. She has written a book called Mindset. And so in their study, in this study by Mueller and Dweck, I just want you to focus on this data here. Basically, the same instructor taught 3 different sections of math classes in high school. And if you look at the students' performance at the beginning of the course in some pre-math exam, what you see is that there is no statistically significant difference between the 3 sections, okay? Now, what they did in the 3 different sections was that the teacher, who was the same, did slightly different things in the 3 cases. In one class, the instructor emphasized growth mindset, which means every time he would give a homework or quiz back, he would say, oh, John, this time you worked really hard, you've done really well. Or if somebody didn't do well, he would say, oh, you know, this time it looks like you didn't work hard enough. You know, like I'm here to help you, but, you know, remember to work hard next time and, you know, work smart next time. And if you need help, I will support you, but I want to see better performance. So it was basically working hard, working smart, being deliberate, doing challenging problems. Those things were emphasized. In the second class, what was emphasized was fixed mindset. So fixed mindset means it was like, John, you did well because you must be brilliant. That's this group. And if somebody didn't do well, then it's like, you know, like, which meant that you're not brilliant. And then there was no, you know, there was a control thing. That means there was no praise to any of the students for anything. The instructor just returned everybody's thing. And when you gave the same thing, same post-test final exam at the end, what you see is in the class in which effort was emphasized, students did really well. In the class in which intelligence was emphasized, students did poorly. And the middle group was middle, right? It was in the middle. And now if you really look at what the students were doing, and it's worth reading this paper, because if you read what the students were doing in these classes, it was very different. So in one class, in the growth mindset class, that means where effort was emphasized, the instructor would say, what kind of problems should we be doing? Should we be doing challenging problems or, you know, just easy problems? And students will be, I want to do challenging problems. I want my brain to grow. You know, so in this class, students wanted to do challenging problems. In this class, they wanted to do easy problems. In this class, they wanted to go to the instructor for help. In this class, they didn't want to go to because they didn't want to work with other people and talk about their struggles because they were afraid that it will come out that they are not intelligent. Because when you emphasize intelligence, then people are afraid to talk about their struggles and what they are having difficulty with. They don't want to do challenging problems. So if you read this paper, you'll see that people were doing very different things throughout the year in these 2 courses. So it's not surprising that this is the kind of thing that will happen at the end.
Can I ask a question here?
Please.
So this is really interesting, and it definitely accords with sort of my own intuitions and things I've seen in the classroom. But if this is the right stuff I'm thinking of, weren't there like issues with replicating this, or was this, maybe I'm just getting,
No,
you know,
I think
very
I think you're getting confused. I think that the one that you're talking about that people were having difficulty replicating is the self-affirmation. So self-affirmation is a totally different thing. Self-affirmation. So this one, notice that, as I said, these studies have been replicated really well, actually. In fact, people have found long-term effects of these, like even beyond those courses. In fact, we ourselves found long-term effect of similar intervention that I'm going to talk about right now. So I think that the one that you are going to, you are probably confusing this with, Caden, is what is called self-affirmation or value affirmation study. And in those studies, it's not that you do something at the beginning of the course, or you're doing like this kind of a growth praise or effort praise, or intelligence praise, but rather right before every exam, you ask students to write their values. And then you see, whether that has any impact on things or not, because the idea there is that maybe if you ask students to write what are the things that really they value, maybe their stress and anxiety will come down. They'll think about their life as not just consisting of this physics exam, but as consisting of like too many things, and there's too many things that are important for their life. Somehow that study has not been replicated. Maybe that's what you're thinking of.
Great. Maybe, yeah, thanks.
Okay, so this one has shown, by the way, so what did we do? We replicated the same kind of thing. And by the way, this thing now has been replicated at University of Minnesota, Cincinnati, Princeton University, Ohio State University. At least that many institutions I know have done this intervention and have seen positive benefits. Basically, we incorporated a similar kind of thing in our introductory calculus-based courses. Okay, and it's a short activity that takes only 25 to 30 minutes. 3 instructors participated, and these are really huge classes with 270 students. So half of their recitations were randomly assigned to this kind of what we call ecological belonging and mindset intervention group, and the other half was nothing, business as usual. And so these things really happened during the recitation, and 6 of the recitations were the intervention group. And basically the idea that we were trying to get across is that struggling is the only way to learn something new. So students should be proud of struggling, since that means that they're already on their way to learning new things, and they should be patting themselves on their back. And they should actually be proud of doing challenging problems. And the facilitator, the instructor, also talked about their own adversity. They said, when I was taking my undergraduate courses, I was, struggling with those. Now I'm a graduate student, I struggle with those things too. And so, because notice that since these were done in the recitation, the instructor is the TA, the teaching assistant for that course. And so the instructor talked about their own adversity, and that was something that was actually designed to be the case, because that actually has a positive impact on students believing that adversity is normal, it's universal, and that it's a good thing. It is a stepping stone to learning new things. So they should be embracing this struggle. They should be tackling challenging problems, struggling with them, and then they'll be learning from that, and they'll be on to the next thing and on to the next thing, etc. And so the idea is to reduce their anxiety, which can actually reduce procrastination to engage in these challenging problems. It can increase their enthusiasm for solving challenging problems, and ensure that their limited cognitive resources are used for problem solving, as opposed to being robbed by anxiety. Because as I said, cognitive science says that people's brain can only keep 5 to 9 chunks while solving problems. And if some of it is being robbed by the anxiety, students are not really putting in their entire cognitive resource to solving those problems. And that's not good. So basically, if I actually go through tell you the steps of the intervention, the first thing was, the TA said, physics department really wants to understand your concerns about being in this course. So here is a sheet of paper. Why don't you write what your concerns are about being here? And so students wrote a lot, actually. Notice that these students are also first-year students, because they are actually in introductory physics 1 and 2. So they are first-year students. They wrote a lot about what their concerns were about being in that physics course, but at 10 minutes, they were told to stop. And at that point, the teaching assistant actually showed testimonials from students from prior year who had been very successful, who had done really well in physics. And the thing really said, those testimonials were saying, yes, like I was really concerned about the same thing. I was really worried about how I would do in this physics course. And then I realized that it was really about working hard, working smart, being deliberate, using effective problem solving strategies, working with other people, going to my instructor's office hour, embracing my challenges. And lo and behold, at the end, I ended up doing really well. Some of those names are names of male students, some of them are female names, some of them are names of white students, some of them are non-white students, and all of them are in their own words saying similar things. And these were testimonials that were really curated from real testimony of the students, but we had combined a couple of them into one. And then, at this point, after going through these, we told students to get together in small groups of 5 or 6 and discuss with each other, what did they write on that sheet of paper? And why don't students realize that struggling is actually universal and that it's a good thing that they should be proud of? Now, notice that when you actually say it, put it like this, why don't students realize? You definitely want them to believe it, right? So when students got together in these small groups and they're talking to each other, at University of Pittsburgh, we found that more than 90% of the students actually had written that they were really concerned about being in the physics course. So in this conversation, now students are seeing that, oh, I'm not the only one who's actually feeling this way. So, okay, that makes people feel good, and especially the people who don't have role models, those minoritized students are feeling particularly good that, oh, other people are also worried about being in this physics course, so their anxiety goes down. And also the fact that they're discussing that struggling is actually a good thing and they should be patting themselves on their back, that's also a good thing because it kind of brings different students together. They all kind of like bond with each other over this idea, and this message is coming from the instructor. So that's an even better thing, because so that's why it creates this ecological learning environment. That's why we call it an ecological belonging intervention, because it's kind of changing the relationship between students, and it's also changing the relationship between the instructor and the students. And so after they discuss this, then each group is asked to, there's one representative from each group who summarizes what happened, what they discussed. And everybody says the same thing again. Every group says the same thing in their own words. And that's a good thing for people to know. This is it. That's what happens the first day. Now, and then the second recitation class, students are given 5 minutes to write down a message to a future student explaining to them why adversity is a good thing, why they should be using struggle as embracing it and using it as a stepping stone to learning, and what strategies should they be using to actually excel in physics course. Now notice that these people are themselves in their second week of physics class, physics 1, and they are asked to write for a future student. It's like they're reflecting and summarizing for themselves, right? Because when you reflect and summarize for yourself, it's like saying is believing. Then you actually start believing in that message yourself. So that was the goal of doing this. And this is it. Nothing happened in the rest of the semester. It was just business as usual. Now, some of the students, some of the recitation classes actually clapped for the TA for doing this. Some of the women and racial ethnic minority students actually went to them and said, I'm so glad you did it at the beginning of the class. I was so stressed about being in this class. I'm feeling so much better. Some students are like, are there other people from the tower? Can we do our homework sets together? So the kind of rapport, the kind of relation that was there among students actually changed. And in fact, the TAs who were in the recitation class in which this intervention happened said that students actually had better relationship with each other when they were working collaboratively in these small group problem solving than the students in the other groups. Yeah, so I already said to you that these are the thing, we did. So, okay, this is an example of what a student had written. I'm extremely worried that I have wrongly overcalculated my mental abilities by ending up in engineering. Right now, all the information I'm learning isn't even new, but I'm still not seeing. So you can see I have smart people around me. I feel like I don't belong here. This is not this is typical of what they were saying. And, women were more likely to say these kinds of things, but all of the students, I mean, as I said, 90+% of the students were concerned about their things. So I'm not, okay, this is an example of a narrative, from Allison, who's a electrical engineering student. If anybody is interested in doing this, I can send you these, send these things to Mustafa, and he can actually share it with you, and you can kind of tweak it for your own classes. By the way, there is a person at UT Austin, David Yeager, who's also part of this Carol Dweck's group. So this kind of stuff is also now happening at UT Austin as well. So if anybody knows him, you can also ask him as well, because they have found similar things there as well. So I wanted to say that if that was the end of it, then I would still have felt better, because a lot of students were feeling better. But when we looked at the final exam score in the control group versus the social belonging group, what you see is that the brown is women and blue is men. You see that there is a difference here between the performance of men and women, whereas there is no difference in the social belonging group. Okay, and in fact, like if you look at the final, the grade in physics, it's the same thing. And by the way, this intervention actually was done with the help of a colleague of ours who is from Stanford, who came here. So he's now in psychology here. He came from one of these groups. So we did it with him. And so he also helped implement this in biology, where also they found benefit. But if you look at the physics data, the benefits are not just for women, but also for racial and ethnic minority students. Like when you separate people out, you see that in the intervention group, similar kinds of benefits are also being realized for students who are actually non-white students. So short activity, focused on belonging and mindset, helped reduce the gap. And now, we are actually looking at how to actually do professional development of the TA, because now we are doing it in all of our recitation classes, because we feel that this is so beneficial that we should be doing it in all cases. And what we are also finding is that when you look at students' sense of belonging, because we are giving pre-post survey, the sense of belonging of women is so much higher in the social belonging group compared to the control group. So it's definitely helping. And in terms of long-term effect, we are seeing that there are some advantages to students' GPA, grade point average, going forward in the social belonging group compared to the control group. I wanted to say that the same kind of things are really important in research lab also for women and other students who are from underrepresented groups, because lack of inclusive mentoring and supportive environment can again increase students' anxiety. And students who don't have role models, or who are first generation students, they don't know what it's like to whether they're doing a good job or not. And if you don't say that it's, the research doesn't go in a straight line, it'll go forward, backward, forward, backward. And so long as you're drifting in some certain direction over a relatively long period, over several months, then you are already doing well. Many students will think that they're not actually doing well, and they might again drop out. So it's really important for you as an instructor to recognize students and tell them that they are making good progress, and affirm them, and make sure that they don't feel like they are not making progress. And so I think that that struggling is actually a good thing. And just because they are struggling with their research doesn't mean that they have failed. In fact, that's part of the process of doing research. Failure is just giving up. So I think that when you make it clear and you say that this is the way you yourself used to do things when you were a student, or you're doing things now, I think that that would actually make students feel much better and lower their anxiety, and they will want to actually do that research with a lot more enthusiasm than they otherwise would. So I think that at this point, I would like to stop here and take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
I'll clap for everyone. Thanks a lot, Chandraleka, and we can maybe open the floor up for questions.